Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we are going to be learning how to fix a new toy, and that toy is the Mattel Eagle from Space 1999, or to be more precise, the three figures that came with the Space 1999 Eagle. The Eagle is one of those toys I've been wanting to get in my collection for many years, and I have the broken remains of one that I'm trying to find parts and pieces for, but I do have all of the figures. So I thought while I'm trying to find the parts for the rest of the toy, it would be fun to learn how to fix up these figures and get them looking nice and get them ready for when I do finally have an Eagle to put them in. Now there are three figures in the line. We have Professor Victor Bergman, we have Dr. Helena Russell, and then we have Commander John Koenig. These three figures all basically use the same parts, and they suffer from a few common issues, it seems, and as I've never worked on them before, I thought it would be a fun job to actually try and fix these up and get them looking really nice again. So let's get on with today's project and see if we can repair these toys. So here are the figures that I'm going to be trying to fix today, and what exactly is wrong with them? Well, you can see here that a couple of them are missing arms, but I'm hoping that somehow we can transplant one arm onto another figure. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work, because I can see these arms rotate, and it's actually this bit of plastic on the inside of the arm that rotates. But whether you can actually get these arms out, I have no idea, but we will give that a try. I've also got this Victor Bergman here who is missing a hand, so we will try casting a new hand using blue stuff and some milliput and maybe a bit of styrene rod or something to give it some strength. So that will be a fun issue. They're also all really filthy, so everything is going to need a good clean. But I think hot soapy water and a magic eraser and a toothbrush should clean most of that off. We've also got the backpacks, which should look like this, but because of the sort of plastic they're made of, they tend to end up looking like this, so that needs a repair as well. And generally, just a little bit of TLC. I can see there's a few other issues. This figure here, this is Helena Russell. The rubber is starting to come away on the shoulder, so I'm going to have to glue that back on somehow. It's generally just going to be a sort of learning process, as I've never worked on these before, and I can't see anyone else who's actually worked on them, or at least sort of posted any information about it. So we'll just see what happens and see what we can do to them. So first thing to do, let's give them a good clean. Hot soapy water, a toothbrush and a magic eraser should get most of the dirt and grime off this rubbery material which the bodies are made of. These are pretty old toys. They were made in 1976, and I'm guessing they've probably been in storage for most of that time, so they are pretty filthy. So that's 50 years worth of dirt and grime to wash off. So let's get them all cleaned up and then we'll start trying to do some repairs on them. These are now washed and clean and looking a whole lot better. There's a few little areas of sort of dirt and grime left on them, but overall they look a lot nicer. So we can now get on with the first fix. And I think the first fix we're going to try is to replace Victor Bergman's missing hand. So to do that we will be using blue stuff, which is a thermoplastic. You put this in just boiled water, heat it up, it goes all soft. You can then push things into it to make molds of them, and then we can cast something in that, which in this instance is going to be milliput. So what I need to do is boil the kettle and get this melted, or softened at least, so it softens up a whole load, and then I'm going to push some of the existing hands that I have here into it to make a nice mould. So we've got a couple here. So this is Helena, and the great thing about these figures is you can actually take them apart, so I can just take off the top section, and I might as well do two hands at one time, because you never know, it might not work first go. So if I do a couple of different figures, so I'll take John Koenig as well, take him apart. I can push two left hands into this blue stuff, and that means I can make two different versions, and hopefully one of them will work. So let's get the kettle boiled and this stuff softened, and then we'll push these hands in and see what happens. So here we have some just boiled water. I'm going to drop the blue stuff in. It takes about 1 to 2 minutes for it to soften up, and then we can push these hands into it and make some little moulds. Okay, so that feels soft enough, so I'm just going to quickly sort of fold it into a slightly larger lump, put it onto my cutting mat, and then we'll push these hands in and try and get the blue stuff to sort of mould around them. I'll push the other one in as well. It's really quite weird stuff. If you've never used it before, you'll find it such a strange sort of material the first go you have, but it is incredibly useful for making little moulds like this. And you can reuse it over and over again. So you never throw it away, you just heat it up and reshape it and start again. So the blue stuff has now had time to cool, and while I've been waiting for that, I've mixed up some milliput, which is a two-part sort of epoxy modelling clay. So that is now ready to go. So my plan is I'm going to remove these hands. They should just pop out like that. I'm going to push milliput into those holes and sort of push it around as much as I can, try and get in every corner, because if you look at the original hands, they're fairly complicated. There's lots of details in them. And then once I've got that in, I'm actually going to push in a tiny piece of this about 2mm diameter styrene rod, because the problem with milliput is it's quite brittle. So if I just made the hand out of the milliput, it would snap off at the wrist again. So by pushing a piece of this in, that will act as the sort of wrist support. So we'll have a nice sort of piece of milliput at one end and the styrene to take the weight, and we can then drill a hole into the original arm and attach it using the rest of this little bit of styrene rod. So that is my plan. Whether I can get them to actually mould properly, because we're going to be pushing milliput into a sort of a rather awkward shape, that's the bit that I'm not too sure about. So I also have this little dotter stick, which I'm going to use to push the milliput in as much as I can. So it may or may not work, but that's the thing you have to try when fixing toys. We can give this a go. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else. So let's push this milliput in, then push the styrene rod in, leave it 24 hours and see what happens.
toy-polloi. That is incorrect. Try again.
It's now a day later, so let's see if these have actually worked. We'll just give them a little sort of bend to try and loosen the milliput and see what they look like. I'm hoping that at least one of them will be passable and we can sort of tidy it up and fit it. If they're not, then I will have a go and make them again, but let's see what these look like. Yeah, they're quite well stuck in, which is what I'd expected. So let's just bend this open a bit. Sometimes if you get them tightened like this, the way to get them out is actually to cut the blue stuff just with a knife, because you can cut it and split it. And I think that is what I'm going to have to do here. These are not coming out. Oh, there we go. That one's come out. Oh, actually, that doesn't look too bad. It's a little on the large side, but that is not bad at all. That one's, yeah, that's a good starting point. We can certainly work with that. Let's see if I can get this one out using the same sort of technique, pushing from underneath. There we go. All right, look, that one is broken. So yeah, we've got one that's worked and one that has snapped off. The rest of that is left in there. I think that is good enough to work with. We can certainly file that down and sand that down and make it look like a reasonable hand. So let's get to work on that. After a little bit of sanding and filing, this is the hand that I've managed to come up with, and it's a pretty close match. I'm very happy with how that looks. This is actually the one that I broke. The one that came out fully was just a little bit on the large side. That sometimes happens when you use blue stuff. It doesn't quite sort of get the shape that you want. So the second one did work very nicely, apart from the fact that I broke the fingers off. So I've just actually glued those back in place and then sort of filed and sanded it. And you can see if I hold that up to the Helena Russell figure, that is pretty close, and it's got a fair amount of detail on it. So I'm going to use this one to replace this hand. So what we've got to do now is drill a hole into the end of this arm where it's broken off. Now the bit of styrene rod that I used is 2mm, so I have a 2mm size drill bit in my drill, and I'm just going to drill in maybe sort of 5mm into that, just enough that I can get a good fixing. Then we'll trim off the rod and we'll glue that in place and give that a little bit of paint. I think that will look pretty reasonable. So yeah, let's drill this hole into Victor Bergman's arm. I'm going to drill very, very slowly and only drill in about 5mm, because that really is all we need to do for a fixing. Feels about far enough, so let's see if this actually fits in. I'll just do a test quickly with the styrene rod. It does, so now let's trim this off. And I've gone in about 5mm, so let's just trim that down to about 5mm. We may need to do a little bit more modification, but let's see if this actually fits first. Oh, there we go. That doesn't look too bad. It's a little bit long at the moment, so I'm going to trim down the end of the wrist. I left a fair amount of the milliput there, so I'll just trim that down a little bit more so it goes in a bit flusher, and also thin out the wrist a little bit more. But overall, I'm very happy with how that's looking. The paint I'm going to use is just some acrylics. I've got a few different types here. I've got Vallejo model colours, and I've got a, I think this is an older Revel colour. This is aqua colour, and this is a flesh tone, number 35, but it's not really the same sort of tone of flesh as this, which is a very sort of orangey white. So what I've done is I've mixed a bit of this flesh tone with some white, and then I've added in a tiny bit of this game colour, which is called gold yellow. And I've got this tone, which I think is pretty close. It's a very sort of odd flesh tone colour, so I think this will work. It's basically just to hide the fact that we've now got a bit of white milliput on this side. You can see though that tone is not too bad. Maybe needs a couple of coats just to hide the white underneath, but I think that will do. And once that's all dry, I'm then going to cover it with a satin varnish. So this is again a Vallejo top coat. This is number 70.522. It's really just to hide the fact that it's a totally different colour, and I think this is just about all we need. It's never going to look perfect, but it's certainly going to be a displayable piece once we've got this hand painted. The paint on Victor Bergman's hand has now had time to dry, and I'm more happy with this than I thought I would be. It actually does look the part. It's a slightly different colour, but that's often the way when you're painting something and the original is bare plastic. The bare plastic just has that certain look to it that you cannot replicate with paint. But the overall effect on that is really good, and I think most people wouldn't notice. So when this is sat inside the eagle, it's going to be pretty hard to spot. So I think that figure is now done, and we can move on to these two. And my plan is with this to try the boil and pop method. Now the boil and pop method is something I use on Star Wars figures all the time. You basically put these figures into just boiled water and let the plastic warm up, and then once the plastic's had time to warm up, it starts to soften, and I'm hoping I should be able to pull at least one of these arms out of the socket and put it into the other one. I can see from looking at these that the arms actually have a joint that goes inside the body. This little post here rotates, so it's going to have a peg going that way, and that's what we've got to try and remove. Obviously I need to take off these broken ones as well, so we're going to have to try and get those out, but I think boil and pop is the first way to do it rather than drilling out things. I'm hoping it works. So Helena is actually going to be my sort of sacrificial figure. She is the one I'm going to try and remove the arm on first, and we'll just see what happens. And if it breaks, it breaks. These are already broken, so I'm not going to lose anything by trying. And if it does break, I will work out another fix and attach it to John Koenig here. So let's get the kettle on again, some freshly boiled water, and we'll warm this plastic up and see what happens. So here we have some just boiled water. I'm going to drop the two figures in, leave them for sort of 30 seconds to a minute, and then we'll see what we can do. I've got some pliers here of different sizes, and I'm hoping I'll just be able to pull those arms out. That would be the ideal solution to this, but we won't know until we try. Okay, it's been about a minute. Let's see what these figures are like. I've done a few tests as I've been going, and I can certainly feel the orange plastic is getting nice and soft. I'm hoping that the other plastic will also be soft and we can pull these out. Oh yeah, these are really hot. That's what you want, the figures to be really hot. So let's grab this broken post and see if we can pull it out. It's certainly gone pretty soft. I can actually feel it sort of bending and moulding with my pliers there. Let's see if I can gouge that out. Maybe with these pliers. Oh yeah, there we go, look. That is what the post looks like, and that's the interesting bit. Once you know what the shape of the post is like, you know you can remove the rest of the arm. So yeah, that is really good. Let's try and get this arm out. In fact, I'm going to warm it up again, and while we're waiting for that one to warm up, let's remove the broken peg from John Koenig. This is very hopeful. Oh, and on that one, we've had a bit of an issue. The actual post has broken, so I'm going to have to try and gouge this out just with a bit more force. We should still be able to do it because this orange plastic has gone really soft. Yeah, okay, that's great. So that is the arm post out. Let's try and remove Helena's arm without breaking the post. I've got a bit more of an idea of what I'm doing now, and that's the whole point of this video, learning how to fix a toy. So let's get Helena out. I think the idea is I need to push this quite far down into the rubber, try and get around the back of the post. There we go, I can see the edge of it. And there's the arm out. Right. So for the next trick, we've got to reverse the process. I'm actually going to just warm up the body because I don't think I need to warm up the plastic on this arm. Let's warm up the body again, and I'm going to get a couple of different tools, maybe a screwdriver, because I reckon I can push this arm back in. And that would be fantastic if it's that easy to replace these broken arms. Okay, so that is probably warm enough. He's sunk right to the bottom now. So I think what we need to do is sort of open this hole up a bit. So I'm just going to put my pliers in and give it a bit of a stretch. You can see the rubber is really pretty soft. I can then take this, and I think with some sort of brute force and pushing, I reckon I can get that back in the hole before it cools down. Yep, and there you go. This is the exact same process that you use on Star Wars figures. Fantastic, look at that. We have a John Koenig with two arms again. That was certainly a lot easier than I'd expected. I was thinking it would be a much sort of harder job, but these old toys generally do seem to have the sort of same construction, and this is a pretty similar sort of method, as I say, to Star Wars figures. So poor Helena here now has no arms, but maybe in future I'll find other figures where I can swap arms onto. And the broken parts I'm actually going to keep, because often when I'm fixing toys I'll have forgotten the sort of construction of them. So if I keep the broken parts and I come to fix one of these in future, I can just look back at them and go, oh right, well that's how it's constructed. And certainly with this one, the parts on this will be very useful in future, even if I just use the legs on something, because as we saw, Professor Bergman comes with these sort of seated legs, and sometimes it might be quite nice to have him standing. So I've got a spare pair of legs there, and we can have a standing version of Victor Bergman. But yeah, for now, these will go into my spares pot for future use. This Helena figure seems to have one issue with her arm as well. You can see the rubber is starting to detach from the plastic underneath. So I think we can just put a little bit of super glue on that and push everything together, and that should hold it. You can see on this side that arm is how it should look. The rubber is nice and sort of flush against everything. Yeah, so a bit of super glue in there will work. You don't want to just sort of squeeze super glue in, because that will go everywhere, and you risk gluing things that you don't want to glue together. So what I'm going to do is get some super glue and put it onto a piece of paper, and then use a pin to carefully put it where I want the super glue to be. So this is a pin tool that I've shown a few times on the channel, something that I've made myself. Just get some super glue onto the end of the pin, and I can carefully dot it into the areas that I want the glue to be, and I won't get glue on all of the other areas, which is definitely something you don't want to do when fixing toys. Getting glue on places that you don't want is a common problem. So just enough glue in there to make sure it all sticks, and I can push these two pieces together, would hold that until it sets, and hopefully that arm will look as good as new. Yeah, and there we go. You can see the rubber is now attached to the internal plastic pieces. That's a nice simple fix as well. Now we come on to a really fiddly fix, and that's going to be the backpack. So this is one of the backpacks. It's supposed to clip around the body. The clips on the side, one of them is broken, but it should be enough to still sort of hold it in place. You can still get those little side clips to fit in, but you can see the strap that goes over the shoulders on one side has snapped. Now this sort of plastic you can't glue, it's just too sort of bendy, so we're going to have to try and pin and glue this, which makes it a really tricky job because you can see how thin that piece of plastic is. So my plan is to drill into it using an incredibly small drill bit. You can see here I've got it's going to be sort of less than 0.5 millimeter diameter drill bit there in my pin vise. And into the hole I'm going to insert a piece of a staple. So this is a selection of staples, and here we have one staple, and the idea is that we'll use that to pin it. So we can push that into there. You can see the diameter is about half the diameter of the piece of plastic, so I should be able to get that staple in there. And then likewise I've got to drill a hole into here, and we can pin and glue that staple in place, and hopefully that will be enough to hold this, so at least we can get it displayed. It's never going to be a particularly strong fix, but it will be a fix that is good enough for display purposes. So that is the challenge today. It's going to be fairly fiddly to do, and I've got to just drill very slowly and very carefully and make sure I don't sort of split this piece of plastic too much. And I'm only going to go in 3 or 4 millimeters. It doesn't need to be much because it's just enough to hold it. Luckily the backpack part of this is fairly thick plastic, so that we actually have a little bit more sort of leeway in. It's drilling into here that's going to be the hard part. So let's see if I can actually get this done, and we'll try and get the backpack looking like this one. Okay, you can see I've just about got that in there, so I'm going to put a tiny amount of super glue onto the end of that, and we'll glue it in place, then trim it down, and I can insert it into there, and we'll sort of bend it to make it fit and form the shape that we want. But that is just about gone in. It's only gone in, as you can see, sort of 2 or 3 millimeters, and I could already feel it sort of hitting the edge. So I think that's as close as I can get. So let's glue this one in. So I say just a little bit of super glue on the end of that, and then we'll trim it down. But it's a really risky job doing these sorts of fixes, but if the toy is already broken, what harm does it do if you break it a bit more? It's, you know, it can't be displayed as is, so you've got to try these things. So let's put that in there, just a tiny amount of super glue on the end, like so. I'm then going to trim this down again, so there's only sort of 2 or 3 millimeters coming out of the end of it. It should break really easily because this is just a staple, like that. I've already test fitted the staple into the main part of the backpack, so we'll just again put a little bit of, just a tiny amount of super glue onto that, and then we'll push that into there, like so. There you go, you can see those two pieces are held together, and we should be able to bend them. Yeah, it's not the strongest of fixes, but it's going to be a displayable fix. That doesn't look too bad at all. So just let that glue dry, and then we'll test it on the figure. That glue has now had time to set, so let's test this on the Helena figure, see what it looks like. That's to pop over her head. Let me rotate that down, and then these straps should clip in on either side. As I said, one side of the sort of clip is broken, but it should be strong enough to hold the remains of this in place. I think it just about is, and you can see that is where we have repaired the backpack. It's a little bit messy, but this thing is so tiny. I'm happy with how that is looking. And this figure, we can now put the helmet on, and there you go. That is a nice complete Mattel Space 1999 Eagle figure, and I think I'm pretty much done with this project. And there we go, that is it for this project, and it's been a really fun project because I've been learning something about a toy that I've wanted to fix and work on for many years. So I now have a set of these figures ready to go, and if I manage to find the rest of the missing parts I need for my Mattel Space 1999 Eagle, I can get to work on that project as well. So yeah, this has been a really fun thing to learn. These are nice little figures. In fact, I think they stand alone really quite nicely. They could probably do with a little bit of a paint job because they are such basic figures, but all the details are there. If you painted the hair on and some details on the outfits, they would really look like the outfits and costumes that you see in Space 1999. So as I've got a couple spare, maybe that will be something that I will do in future. If you've enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And if you've really enjoyed it and want to help me out here at toy-polloi, then why not think about becoming a patron of the channel. You get early access to all of my restoration videos, plus access to an exclusive video series called On the Cutting Mat, where you'll see projects and restorations that you won't see anywhere else. So have a think about that, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy-Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.